twice exceptionality? What is that anyway? Is it giftedness? Does it mean you can do things twice as well as anybody else? I mean, after all, it's kind of become a hype term, hasn't it? But aren't we all twice exceptional at something? So, oftentimes we hear new words in society, and these words get changed often. But there actually is a definition. There's many definitions as to what twice exceptionality is. But I like this one in particular. Twice exceptionality, or what they call 2E individuals, is individuals who evidence exceptional ability and disability at the same time. Now, not everybody who has a disability is twice exceptional. Basically what it is it's a result of a unique set of circumstances. Their exceptional ability may dominate hiding their disability. Their disability may dominate hiding their exceptional ability. Each may mask the other so that neither is recognized or addressed. Now, I like that because when you look at children, for example, you may see some that are really hyperactive in the classroom, may not be paying attention to anything, and you think, they're never going to have anything go well in their lives. The teachers are talking to the parents. The diagnosticians are saying, well, you're going to have to put them on medication, and that might be right, that might be not so right. It just depends on the kid. But there might also be the quiet kid, the kid who's struggling with math and reading and writing. But all of a sudden, you give them a music class, and they can do anything without music in front of them. And you're amazed, you're perplexed. But they remain having difficulty in some of the academic areas until they get a little bit older and they start speaking up and coming up with these really philosophical insights, and the teachers are amazed. So sometimes it takes time for you to recognize these things. So today it is all about this twice exceptionality, but it's not a new thing. We've talked about individuals who are gifted learners for a long time, and we've had gifted classrooms. But the 2E students, or today's terminology of 2E students, are typically not placed in with gifted learners unless they happen to also be academically gifted in some areas and also have other exceptional talents that are discovered along the way. Or maybe they're just exceptional in math but struggling in writing. And these are just some examples. They're highly knowledgeable and talented in at least one particular domain. For example, like I said, mathematics. However, their giftedness is often overshadowed, again, by their disabilities. So sometimes with twice exceptional child special education, these needs are overlooked until adolescence or later, or unfortunately, they're never identified in their life. Who started this? Well, we can go back to maybe saying Leonardo da Vinci. He had many, many talents. He was a sculptor. He was an inventor. He worked on many, many things that brought us into the world of where we are today. He was also chased down by the Catholic Church. He was called a heretic. We might look at him today as being a person with mental illness. We might look at him today as having other types of disabilities. Back then, they didn't have special education. They didn't have the types of formal educational processes we have today. So he was allowed to invent. But he was also looked at as kind of a really unusual character, but respected by many. But there are many examples of this throughout time, but they certainly weren't called 2E. Or was it back in the caveman times? Was it the guy who stood by a rock while everybody else walked away and said, we can't move it. There's no way we can move that rock. And one guy comes along, he picks up another rock and places it on the larger rock and gets another rock on top of that and starts pounding. And he breaks the rock into pieces. Was he twice exceptional? When they all looked at him all of his life and thought he wasn't capable of doing anything. But he discovered how to break those into tiny pieces. It's been around for all time. We have been unconsciously biased about individuals who are 2E for years and centuries and millions of years. What about Einstein? We anticipate that Einstein probably had an IQ near 160. Was he gifted or was he twice exceptional? Well, basically Einstein had a lot of difficulties in school. They have determined through his writing and his early math scores and things like that, that he had some learning difficulties. And now with the information we have on autism and many years ago Asperger's, Einstein was identified as being the type of individual that may very well have had Asperger's and now autism at the higher level, autism 1. He was an individual who everyone would now say was 2E, twice exceptional. He's not just classically a gifted individual, although he had many, many gifts. But he also struggled. I don't know how many are aware of this, but he had the same color suits and shirts and shoes in his closet. Some people would say, oh, he was just eccentric. But he struggled socially. He struggled horribly socially. He struggled with a lot of things at the lower level of academics, but he excelled at the higher level of academics. That is what you often see. But we ask ourselves, if I'm not gifted, I'm not twice exceptional, and I may never measure up. But you may be gifted, you may be twice exceptional, but the one thing I will tell every human being is that we all have potential. And it's important to remember that you don't have to fit into any of these classifications because all of us as human beings have potential. When it all started out, they looked at this as disabilities in general, and you can have any type of disability to be twice exceptional. But again, you have to have strengths and talents in certain areas on top of having a particular type of disability. But a disability would require an accommodation to level the playing field. Difficulties, and this is just the average everyday person, may need enrichment in the areas of weakness. And then you hear about differences. Differences need to understand strengths and weaknesses. So when you think about twice exceptionality, it is a diagnosed condition, a diagnosed disability, plus having an exceptional talent in something, like I said, in mathematics, in music, in sports, in philosophy. Maybe there are these people that can look at a situation and analyze it and come back with an incredible response, answer. Maybe that there's a child that doesn't do well in school and they're sitting with their parents watching a movie. And it's a really complicated movie, and say they're 14 years old, and their parents are always worried because they solve the plot very beginning of the movie every single time. And their parents are in quandary. How can they do this when they can't even make C's and D's in school? How can they figure these things out? How can they problem solve so well? What are we going to do with them? Twice exceptionality is a wide range of interests, not related to school necessarily. They penetrate insight into complex issues. They have a specific talent on consuming interest areas. They might spend an inordinate amount of time researching and studying. They have a sophisticated sense of humor. Now, this just doesn't apply to all individuals with twice exceptionality. These are just specific categories that you might pick up on. These kids might have a superior vocabulary, but they might not be able to comprehend and understand anything they read. So it's this really out of sync capability. When I was growing up, I couldn't read or write or do basic math. And I faked my way all the way through school. I had a terrific vocabulary, and I was able to analyze almost everything around me. Although I was shy and withdrawn and I didn't have many friends, when the instructor would ask me to give an answer to something, as long as I was listening to everybody around me, I was able to surmise and give a response. Just so long as I didn't have to read it out of a book. I always counted on the people around me. Watch this in individuals, especially in the children, to see where they're going. They have high levels of creativity and problem-solving ability. They're extremely curious, imaginative, and watch those kids and those adults who like to ask a lot of questions. Profound questions, not simplistic questions. Although when young, they're going to be simplistic. Twice exceptionality also, unfortunately, very often, not always, have poor social skills. And unfortunately, because they go through their lives being ridiculed and bullied, and they don't have a lot of friends, sometimes, again, not always, can have a high sensitivity to criticism. They might lack organizational and study skills because they may have poor executive functioning skills. They may have discrepant verbal and performance ability, so high verbal, poor performance. They may have poor performance in one or more academic areas, like I had mentioned earlier. But you know, again, you can have a person in the gifted programs and just have one poor academic area and still be a twice exceptional person. They may just have a disability in one major academic area. And this is the area that gets missed a lot and unfortunately can come back to haunt them in their adult years if it's not picked up on. They can also be stubborn and opinionated. And unfortunately, they get tagged with high impulsivity many times. Don't take these ideas as an all or nothing thing. Each individual is very unique and different. You may see some of these things in yourself. It doesn't mean you are or are not a twice exceptional person. Only a diagnostician can determine disability, and only really gifted and smart people can determine twice exceptionality, and some diagnosticians can determine this too. It's tricky. You may know it when you hear this. You may say, hey, I can write music but can't read a note. I can play any piece of music I've heard once perfectly, but I can't do some of the basic things in academics. Or maybe you're a person who was born with some type of physical disability, and you also have twice exceptionality. Think about Beethoven. He wrote those prolific musical pieces. He was deaf. He was twice exceptional. This goes across the board. So how did this all begin? Gifted students who are identified as having LD is what started it. LD students who are identified as being gifted, and average students who are usually not identified until later. I have a dear friend of mine. He's a brilliant person. His name's Dr. Jim Russell. He did a TED Talk on twice exceptionality. I would encourage you to watch that. It's Dr. Jim Russell. He really goes into detail about twice exceptionality. And I think it will give you more insight into this in addition to this one. So where do we go from here? What happens to young people with twice exceptionality? Where do they even know, and do they even know what twice exceptionality is? How do you help them to help themselves? Because enabling them will destroy them, because they're very, very smart. It may not be measured intelligence, but it is functional intelligence, and it develops with time if it's encouraged. Why do so many professionals, even families, miss these individuals? Remember what I said. Sometimes it's masked by the disability itself. And sometimes when you have a disability, everybody wants to take care of you, and they don't want to let you develop and grow. This is where we need to show them those talents will help them become proficient in other areas in their life. My talent was music. My parents were smart enough to put me into it, and it gave me the strength to see what else I could do. So we're going to continue with these YouTubes, and I hope you'll join me again. Thank you very much. This is Veronica Lee Crawford from Life Development Institute in Phoenix, Arizona.